This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 88 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer, and thank you for joining the Practice of Therapy podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome, and I'm glad you found us, and hope you'll continue to listen to the podcast and subscribe to it wherever you might be listening to it. I hope you're having a great summer so far. As I'm recording this, it's July the 12th, and I just got through doing a webinar that I've been talking about, the Knowing Your Numbers webinar, Knowing Your Numbers in Private Practice webinar. And you can still go over and sign up for that. Even though the webinar, the live version of the webinar is over, you can still go over to practiceoftherapy.com/knowingyournumbers and still get access to that webinar for the next few days. It's only going to be available for about 10 days. And also, if you'll listen to the webinar all the way through, you'll be able to find out about some bonuses and special offers with the Money Matters in Private Practice course that's out there. And the other thing, too, I'll give you a little heads up on is I've been working with my friend Julie Harris to create some bonus materials for kind of a bonus version or an expanded version of the Money Matters for Private Practice course. And in that expanded version or the bonus material version of the course, Julie and I go into detail on things around tax deductions, what to pay employees, how to figure that out. Also, just thinking about allocation percentages. What are some of the best allocation percentages for private practices? And so go take a look at that. And maybe the place to start is to do the free webinar first, just to see where I give just an overview of this whole concept around financial management in your private practice. So, so check that out. practiceoftherapy.com/knowingyournumbers. And that'll get you to the place where you can still register for the webinar. In today's episode is going to be a little bit of a departure from the norm. I don't have anybody that is a guest today. It just happened to fall that way. I've got some other guests lined up that I'm really looking forward to. One of them is my friend Stacy Lanier, and Stacy was actually my supervisor back when I worked for an agency. But she's going to be coming on here in the future, and I'm real excited about talking with Stacy. But last week's podcast was with my friend David Hall, and one of the books that he mentioned in the podcast really, I thought, well, I'm gonna find out about that book, and it's Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, and it's called, the subtitle is How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference. And so that was just kind of intriguing to me. And so all this past week, I went ahead and got the book on Audible, and I've been listening to that book and just boom, wow, it just blew my mind, just to hear that and hear his concepts. I knew about Malcolm Gladwell, but didn't know that much about him. So I've been kind of stalking him online a little bit. Fascinating man, fascinating guy, and just has so much insight into human behavior, which, here we are. Most of us, as David was talking about, are mavens around psychology and things around human behavior. I think those of us in this field were just fascinated by people. And in particular, in the book, he talks about how things kind of catch on and what are the tipping points for things that really change the world and change things in the world. And he uses a lot of case examples. So in this episode, I'm going to talk with you a little bit more about that and just my thoughts about that. What really got my wheels turning as I've been listening to the book and just really understanding the concepts of how this all ties into marketing our private practices. And one of the big questions I always get from people is how to get more clients, and how can they market their practice, and how can they get people in the door. And so I'll commend this book to you, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. But also in this episode, I want to give you some of my thoughts on that and just some things that I've learned, in the last 10 or so years, just about how to build a practice. Just in particularly, how do you get clients, and what is the tipping point, so to speak, for getting clients. So let's jump into this episode on just how to spread the word about your practice. Last week's podcast episode that I had with my good friend David Hall really spurned a lot of thoughts on my part. In particular, one of the things that he talked about was Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, and the subtitle of that book is How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference. And so I picked up the book on Audible, and it really started listening to it. And boy, it just kind of really got my head spinning and thinking about private practice and what it is that we can do as therapists to bring people to our practice. I would highly recommend the book to you. And Malcolm Gladwell, I've not really been that familiar with him, but there is a lot of stuff on YouTube about him and hearing him talk, and he is just absolutely fascinating in the way he thinks about things. Last week, David was talking about how he learned the word Maven from Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the things that you'll figure out if you start listening to him and watching his YouTube videos is that he's very much a maven himself. He knows a lot about a lot of things. But the thing about the tipping point that really got me thinking about private practice and maybe some of the questions that I get from listeners and that sort of thing. And one of the big areas or big concerns or big, I guess, topics that I get some of the most questions about is just about marketing your practice and getting the referrals that you need for your practice. And so I'd like to talk with you a little bit about that and just some thoughts I've had and some ideas about that. Malcolm Gladwell in the book, The Tipping Point, talks about the ways in which things become a success. And he talks in particular about epidemics and how things turn into epidemics, and the tipping point that occurs to really kind of put things in motion for something to become either, as we like to call it now, viral. We think about a viral video or a viral topic or a viral, something that catches our attention in pop culture. But he talks about the importance of having contact with different types of people. And the three people that he mentions in particular are people that are either connectors. In other words, those are people that have the ability to make connections with others and then connect other people to other people to them. There was the game that was popular a few years ago about the degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. I'm trying to remember the name of that particular game. I think the game is called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, and it talks about being able to link people and actors to Kevin Bacon. And the general rule is that we are only separated from every other person on the earth by 6 degrees of separation. And if we were to begin to look at our friends and that sort of thing, but connectors in particular have the ability to help people make those connections with others. And so if you think about our marketing of our private practices, one of the things that you hear a theme of a great deal is just networking and the importance of being in contact with people that have influence over others. And so I want you to hold on to that thought for a minute. The other type of person are just mavens, or just people that have are gatherers of information and like to help people with things. And my friend David Hall was talking about that in last week's episode. And just it's somebody that collects information and knows a lot about stuff. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, he talks about a friend of his that was, as he called him, he was just kind of the ultimate consumer's report kind of person, that if he wanted to buy anything or get anything, he would check with this friend because they knew about it. They would know about, what's the best macaroni and cheese to buy, or who's having the best sale on a particular item, or where to go buy a certain car, and what's the price you should be paying for that car. So having mavens and being in contact with mavens, are particularly mavens knowing about you and your practice and your work, is an important piece to being able to market to others. And then finally, the third person that Malcolm Gladwell talks about is the persuader, or the salesperson. In other words, people that have the gift of persuading others into things. I think as therapists, we kind of shy away from those kind of people because there's something about it that feels manipulative. But if you really think about it, those of us that are in this field, that are therapists, and we are with people and we sit with people and we help them through their problems, in many ways we kind of fit that mold. We have to persuade them to think about their life differently, persuade them to think about themselves differently in order for change to occur, or at least help them find those changes within themselves, or come to decisions about that for themselves. So again, bringing it back full circle to marketing, most of us have these three characteristics kind of intrinsically, just by virtue of the type of profession that we're in. We have to be able to connect with people. That's one of the basics of therapy, is being able to join with people and being able to engage with people so that they quickly are able to trust us and to feel at ease with us. The other thing is just being able to have the knowledge that we have around what we do in our practices, just from a clinical side of things, of being able to have the knowledge of how the brain works and how psychology works and all of those things. So in that sense, we're very much mavens when it comes to psychology and understanding human behavior. And then thirdly, it's just being able to persuade people, not so much persuade, but be able to talk with people about making changes, of being able to, in some ways, convince them to quit doing what they've been doing in their lives, and being able to change that and to feel good about that. So when you think about marketing your private practice, we have those skills. And I think that's one of the things that I think is the most important part about marketing your practice, about getting referrals, is making those connections with the right people. So here's the other thing to think about when it comes to getting the clients that you need for your practice. Obviously, the why behind that of getting a certain volume of clients is that we need clients to be sitting in front of us so that we can charge our fees and be paid for what we do. And that's our whole reason in doing what we do in terms of trying to get more referrals. I started thinking about this and I started making some notes, just thinking about the different ways that we can get more clients into our practice. I think one of the things that I've also noticed, and I've told people this before, in particular people that I've maybe done some coaching and mentoring with around private practice building, it particularly those of you out there that might be kind of new to private practice or just getting started, is that there seems to be a phenomenon of developing kind of a critical mass. I know that when I first started into private practice, it seemed like the number of clients I was getting was just kind of hit or miss. And that's what I hear from folks that have written to me or emailed me or just contacted me, is that they say, I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm not getting any clients. I'm doing social media. I'm doing Facebook ads. I'm doing this and that sort of thing. I would say stay at it. It's not that what you're doing isn't correct thing to do, but what will happen is at some point you'll reach a sticking point. Again, that's a Malcolm Gladwell term, is that one of the things that is needed in order for things to kind of take hold is there needs to be a sticking point. In other words, something resonates with someone to where they will want to come to see you, or they'll want to make an appointment with you. Number one, though, as much as anything, is that people need to know that you're there and that you are providing your services. So that's why it's important to get out there and do things like make sure that your website has search engine optimization, and that you're blogging so that you're getting the content out there, so that at least in the online space, people have more what I like to refer to touch points. In other words, there's several different ways they can find access to you, several different paths into getting in touch with you. But here's the other thing too, and just this goes back to thinking about networking and being able to think about the people that you're in contact with. I jotted these things down, and if you think of some other ways in which the reasons that people will come to therapy, or the way, not so much reasons they come to therapy, but the way, the circumstances, I guess is the word I'm looking for, in which they come to therapy. It's really in one of four ways that I could think of. So one is that there are people out there that recognize they need help, and so they will search you out directly. But usually it's because they have a particular problem that they're dealing with. And so in thinking about the online space and just thinking about how they're going to search for that is going to be important, because you need to make sure that you, number one, are a good fit for them, but also that when they go to search for you online through doing a Google search or some sort of search engine, that you've got the right search terms kind of embedded in your website through the metadata and all that. And I don't want to get too technical, but they're going to look using certain what we call keywords. So if, for example, somebody is depressed, they might search something like, I'm depressed. How can I help my depression? Or I'm feeling depressed, or something along those lines. So you want that word depressed to be linked to you somehow or another. So people that are searching for help is making sure that they have the avenue. People that are going through something at that particular time have the avenue to be able to find you, whether it's online or whatever. The other way in which people will get in touch with us or come see us is that to realize is that there are people out there that need help, but they don't realize they need the help yet. And so one of the things about marketing to that is that people might be experiencing anxiety or depression or any other kind of mental health issue that we typically deal with, but they don't have the words for it or the label for it. So, I just think about some clients that I've had where they've come in and they've kind of described their life life to me, and they say things like, I get angry a lot. I just get irritated with people easily, and I don't sleep well. I can't turn my brain off. And, they give this whole list of symptoms. And typically I'll say something like, how long have you been struggling with anxiety, or give it a label. And it's just kind of like the light bulb goes off in their head. So in thinking about getting your message out there is to be able to use that kind of language in either what you're writing or what you're communicating to people on social media, so that they make that connection that, Jane can help me in my, this particular counselor can help me with these symptoms. So again, those are people that might be out there that they recognize that something's amiss, but they don't really recognize that they need the help. And so that's another, I guess, sector to kind of market to or to communicate with. The other people that are important to have in terms of getting referrals or getting a diversity of referrals are people that will refer to you. And I think about, in particular, just relationships with doctors and other professionals that might see people that are struggling with something and they need help. But the person, again, is in that category of, I don't realize I need help. So somebody makes the suggestion that they come see you. So that's really more of not so much a self-referral, but that is somebody else referring. The other way in which I thought about people will come to us is it might be that they're not really experiencing any problems in their life and they're not really struggling with something, but because they have seen your name or they know about you, there might be something in the future that comes up for them, and they remember who you are. And the other part of that is, and it ties into that last example I gave, is that people, they might not need help themselves, but they have a friend or a family member or whatever. They say, they could use some help, or they might come to them and say, I need some help. And so they remember you and know about you through that. So I want you to think about how we get clients and the different avenues for doing that. It's interesting that there's no one foolproof way of getting clients in the door. And I think a big part of it is that you have to get your name out there and get yourself known in many different ways through many different avenues. And then I think also when you reach a certain kind of critical mass in your practice, in other words, you've got clients that are coming to you, you've got people that are wanting to see you, you're starting to maybe even build a wait list or whatever. There's something kind of magical that happens in there, and that you reach that tipping point in your practice. So here's would be the thing that I want to say to you just about that, is particularly of those of you out there that might feel like you're struggling in getting clients. Keep doing all those things that you know are good marketing practices. There's no magic bullet with a particular method. You might get some, you've probably seen some ads on social media or all that sort of thing about, you do this specific thing and boom, you get all the clients you could ever want. Well, I don't think that's realistic, but I think you can do several different things. Be persistent and consistent with that. Be patient with the process. Keep at it. There's something about just being persistent with things and persevering through things that will get you there. And I think that's how I've been able to grow my practice, is that I've just been consistently putting stuff out on the internet. I've just been persistently making contacts in the community. people, former clients now are starting to refer to me. In fact, I get a lot of referrals that way, where I have former clients that will recommend our practice to a friend or something. Also, just those contacts in the community with other professionals, just getting those referrals from doctors and other case managers and that sort of thing. That just comes through persistence and being able to develop those relationships in your community. And if you keep it up, if you stick it out, it will pay off for you. I promise it will. The other thing too, as I mentioned already, is just being patient with that process. On average, I would say most people that go into private practice, and this is maybe some good news, bad news for people, but most people, it takes about 2 years to get established to the point to where you're getting those steady referrals. Those are, and that just seems to be kind of a norm across the board. There are some people that just do it much more quickly. There's people out there that get their practice filled up in about 6 months. And I would dare say it's because they have kind of happened upon the right contacts, happened upon those different touch points that have made a huge difference. And then finally, I think the thing about with that whole idea of touch points is be willing to think outside the box and be willing to create several different touch points or several different ways in which people can be in touch with you. I don't think that there's any one, in fact, I know there's no one particular way that is better than another. I think you've just got to get your name out there. You've got to be known to people and have several different ways of doing that. In particular in this, in our current time, social media is a big touch point. We have so much more contact with people and the ability to communicate with people through social media. I don't necessarily think that you need to take out Facebook ads or anything like that, but I think if you get on social media and get active in different communities and things on there, that's one particular touch point. And just also the, different activities and being involved in your community, I think is an important piece as well. So be persistent, be consistent, hang in there, keep at it, just keep at it, and it will come. Well, folks, I hope this has given you a lot to think about. Reading the tipping point has just really gotten my wheels turning, and just thinking about how all this, as I mentioned earlier, just about how all this ties into what we're doing in our practices and how we can get the word out about our practices, and so that people find us. I meant to mention that, I think about my friend Allison Pereira. She is really kind of a marketing guru when it comes to private practices. And Allison, just quick story here before we end. Allison, in an earlier episode of this podcast, was talking about one of the things that she did when she moved to a new city, moved to Asheville, North Carolina, had no clients whatsoever, a new town where she really didn't know many people at all, but she made it a point to try to connect with one person a day and have either coffee or lunch or have a conversation with them about her practice. And she set the goal for doing one a day for 90 days. So if you think about that, if you were to make 90 contacts, have 90 touch points, that'd be a pretty significant way to kind of make your practice go viral, so to speak. So think about all of that, and do check out the book. And that's a great book. Would highly recommend it to you. And also, I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some TED Talks where Malcolm Gladwell speaks, and it's just fascinating stuff. At least I think so. So glad that you joined me for the podcast, and in the spirit of spreading the word, if you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you let other people know about it. Spread the word to your friends and colleagues that you feel like this might be helpful for, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it, and give us a rating and a review and all of that kind of good stuff. And do check out today's sponsor for the podcast. In fact, they'll be our sponsor through the rest of this month, the month of July, and that's Brighter Vision. And again, same theme. That is the whole purpose in what they do, is helping you get the word out about your practice through your website, and making sure that you've got the right message on your website, and that people are able to find you through search engine optimization. They not only will help you build a beautiful website, they'll make sure that people find you and that you're attracting your ideal client. So check them out today, and you can get to them at brightervision.com/Gordon, Gordon. And when you go use that link, you can get 1 month free of their services, which is a great deal. So go check them out today, Brighter Vision at brightervision.com/Gordon. Well, folks, take care. I hope you have a good rest of your week and a good rest of your weekend whenever you might be listening to this. I love hearing from you, and thanks again for joining me for the podcast and letting me into your ears and into your life and joining you in this journey. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.